Across the vast and silent stars, a strange fear began to grow, and no one knew where it had come from or how it moved so quickly from world to world. But every species in the Galactic Union could feel something was very wrong. Planets once full of light and life had turned quiet, their cities dark, their people gone, and the signals they used to send out into space had stopped without reason, as if swallowed by some silent force no one could see or stop. And at first, the Union believed it was a rare disease or maybe a natural disaster. So they sent ships with doctors and scientists, but none returned, and soon the fear turned into quiet panic, for the unknown enemy didn't speak, didn't fight, and didn't leave anything behind except silence. And as the list of fallen worlds grew longer, the Union gathered in emergency sessions, their leaders speaking in worried tones, knowing that if they didn't act soon, the silence would reach their homeworlds too. And that's when someone, a quiet diplomat from a minor species, finally said the words no one wanted to say, that they needed help from Earth. The one planet everyone had avoided for centuries, the Death World where humans lived, because humans were strange and wild, and too hard to understand, and their world was full of danger, with beasts, storms, and diseases that would kill most species in minutes. Yet, they thrived there, building cities, exploring space, surviving anything nature threw at them. And though the Union had always seen them as unpredictable, even reckless, they also knew humans were tough. More than tough, they were impossible to break. And so the message was sent, a desperate cry across the stars, not just for help, but for something more, something only humans might have, a way to fight back against the silent plague. And when Earth received the message, they didn't answer right away, but when they did, it wasn't with questions or panic. It was with one simple promise: we're coming. And soon after, the first human fleet arrived, not with weapons or warships, but with strange machines, armored suits, and specialists trained in surviving the impossible. And the Union leaders watched as the humans landed on the first dead world, stepping out without fear, walking into the silence with scanners in hand and calm eyes. And for the first time in months, something changed, not in the plague, but in the hearts of those who were watching, because the humans didn't hesitate, didn't flinch, and didn't wait for orders. They just moved forward like they had seen worse and expected more. And the Union realized that maybe this was why they had avoided Earth for so long, not because humans were dangerous to others, but because they were dangerous to fear itself. And as the team began gathering data, collecting samples from the ground, air, and even the bodies left behind, they showed no signs of fear. Even when strange readings appeared on their screens, even when the air shimmered with a strange energy no one could explain. And when asked why they weren't afraid, one of them, a tall woman with a soft voice, simply said, "This isn't the worst we've seen." And those words spread through the fleet like fire, reminding everyone that while the plague was strong, humans were used to fighting things that didn't play fair, that didn't make sense, and didn't stop. And even though the Union still didn't understand how Earth had produced such beings, they began to hope, because if anyone could walk into death and come back with answers, it was them, the Deathworlders, the children of the harshest planet in the galaxy. And as night fell on that ruined world, with stars blinking in the sky above and silence thick in the air, the humans kept working, building their labs, setting up strange towers that pulsed with soft light, and deep underground, their machines listened to the world's final whispers, searching for a clue, a hint, or even a trace of the thing that had stolen so many lives. And though nothing came yet, and the silence still held its grip, something in the way the humans moved, calm, steady, and without fearing it clear that this story wasn't going to end like the others. And somewhere far away, whatever had sent the plague might have felt the first tremble of change, 'cause Earth had answered the call. And humanity was here, not just to survive, but to fight back in a way the stars had never seen before. The moment the human ship touched down on the second infected planet, everything changed, not just for the Union, but for the story that had been unfolding across the stars, because the humans that stepped out of the landers were not ordinary people in uniform. They were something different, something the Union had never seen up close, something the Union scientists began calling unbreakables. Not because they were strong in the usual way, but because their eyes held something cold and focused, something forged in struggle. And every movement they made seemed careful, sharp, and confident, as if they had done this 100 times before, even though no one in the galaxy had ever faced this kind of threat. And when they moved through the ruins of the alien city, now covered in strange mold and pulsing with faint heat, they did not slow down or hesitate, even as sensors beeped in warning and the air turned bitter. And the alien observers, watching from a clean orbit above, expected fear, but saw none, because the humans were scanning, recording, testing, talking to each other calmly through suits that filtered toxins without fail, as if they were taking a walk on a bad day back on Earth. And when one of the smaller aliens asked why they were so calm, a medic named Brooks chuckled through the speaker and said, "We trained in Chernobyl. This is a picnic." And the alien didn't know what Chernobyl was, but it sounded bad, so he said nothing more, only watched as the unbreakables moved deeper into the dead zone, dropping black cylinders into the ground, setting up dome labs that unfolded like flowers. And when strange winds blew dust into the air and formed spinning clouds of ash, the humans didn't stop. They simply locked down the labs and kept working, sending data to orbit, running simulations on portable supercomputers they carried like backpacks. And as more teams arrived, the orbiting Union fleet saw something they had never expected: unity and speed, because each team worked with precision, swapping findings, comparing patterns, and sharing theories across light years with Earth's main science grid. And what they discovered was worse than expected, because this plague wasn't just spreading, it was thinking, learning, changing its pattern every time someone tried to cure it. But the humans didn't seem shocked, didn't give up. They just adjusted, like they always did, like they were used to the rules changing halfway through the game. And that was when the first major breakthrough happened to Dr. Liang, a geneticist who had grown up near toxic rivers in old China, noticed that the infection didn't always act the same way on different surfaces. And when she exposed it to heat pulses in a unique rhythm based on Earth's volcanic patterns, it pulled back, not much, but enough to notice. And suddenly, it was movement in the labs, fast typing, rushed calls, coordinated testing, and new machines being built from parts the Union couldn't even name. And while the Union leaders watched in awe, the humans looked more determined than ever, as if failure was not even a word they allowed in their minds. And when the first test cure failed on a sample and made the infection stronger, they didn't panic. They simply recalculated, changed the formula, and kept going. And slowly, bit by bit, the data started to come together, pieces of the puzzle falling into place, showing that the plague reacted to certain energy pulses, certain magnetic fields, and even seemed to avoid a specific kind of noise one of the engineers accidentally made while calibrating a scanner. A strange, high-pitched human hum that made the plague retreat slightly. And when this was confirmed, they called it resonance effect, and within hours, they were testing it on larger scales, while the Union scientists barely kept up, stunned at the speed of human adaptation. And by the third day, the Unbreakables had restored power to a small section of the city using solar converters and had cleared a safe zone around it, the first such zone ever made on an infected world. And the aliens who had come with the humans couldn't believe what they were seeing. Not just technology or progress, but attitude, the quiet kind of strength that said, "We've seen worse, we'll get through this." And And slowly, some of the union workers who had been frozen by fear began to join the humans, learning from them, working beside them, and even smiling again. And that night, while the stars shined coldly above and the remains of the city lay in dark silence, a young alien assistant named Kelra watched the humans from the edge of the dome, wondering why they didn't seem to break. And when she finally asked one of them, an older woman named Marnie, the reply was simple: because everything on our world tried to break us first, and we survived that. So this is just another fight. And in that moment, Kelra finally understood why the humans had come not just to help, but to remind the galaxy what real strength looked like. And though the plague still raged on other worlds, and the war against it was far from over, something had shifted. A new force had entered the battle. Not one of destruction, but one of relentless survival. And now, the plague wasn't just facing scientists. Sid was facing the unbreakables, and it had no idea what it had just awakened. 4 days. The human teams moved from world to world, each one more silent and lifeless than the last. And though the skies looked calm and the buildings still stood tall, something felt deeply wrong in every place they landed, like the very air was waiting, listening, hiding a secret that no one could yet explain. And as more data was collected, the human scientists began to notice strange similarities patterns in the way the infection spread, in how it grew across the ground, up walls, even inside machines, always in spiral shapes, always avoiding certain areas. And these patterns weren't random, not like normal diseases, because natural sickness did not move in circles or create perfect lines. Yet the plague did, over and over, like it followed instructions, like it knew what it was doing. And when this was reported to Earth, the lead analyst on the deep space biology team, Dr. Elara Singh, reviewed it all with sharp eyes and quiet focus. And after 2 sleepless nights of comparing samples from 15 planets, she made a discovery that changed everything. The infection was not just reacting to the environment, it was adapting, like it was learning. And each new outbreak was slightly different, stronger, harder to trace, like it had seen the last attempt to stop it and evolved past it. And that could only mean one thing: it was not natural. It was designed. And when she told the others, the room fell silent, the weight of that truth sinking into every heart. 'Cause if something had made this, then something or someone had wanted it to spread. And that thought sent a chill through every human on the mission, not because they feared a fight, but because they realized they had been battling a trap with no idea who had set it. And now, everything had to change. So the teams doubled their efforts, searching not just for a cure, but for signs of control frequencies, signals, anything that could explain how a disease could act like a mind. And soon, they found more clues, fragments of code in the infected zones, strange pulses in the ground, energy shifts that didn't match any known power source, all hidden deep within the thick layers of the plague. And that's when the patterns began to shift again, responding to human presence faster than before. Like the infection was watching them, and worse, learning from them, changing its rhythm just slightly whenever new tools were used, dodging detection just enough to stay ahead, but not enough to escape notice. And Elara realized that this behavior pointed to one terrifying idea: the plague was not just adapting, it was testing them, running a kind of intelligence against them, like it was seeing what worked and what didn't, and maybe even trying to understand human thinking. And the more they watched it, the more it seemed alive, not in the way animals were, but like a machine with a purpose. And it was spreading faster now, taking planets that had been stable just days before, as if it was angry or maybe threatened. And while fear began to grow in the hearts of Union leaders, the humans became even more focused, because now they knew this was a race, not just to find the source, but to outthink whatever was behind the infection. And then something strange happened. Small drone on a distant world picked up a sound buried deep under layers of infected soil. A rhythm like a heartbeat, slow and steady, repeating every few minutes. And when the team dug down, they found a black stone covered in symbols no one recognized, humming with weak power and surrounded by hardened threads of the infection that looked almost like veins, as if the plague was guarding it. Or maybe feeding from it. And back in the lab, Ilara studied the stone for hours, and with help from AI decoding tools, she uncovered fragments of old language, barely readable, but enough to reveal a single word that made her freeze, cycle. And she didn't know what that meant yet, but she felt its weight, like it pointed to something ancient, something that had happened before and was now happening again. And that idea burned in her mind like fire, pushing her to dig deeper, faster, because if this had all been done before, the plague had already gone through this somewhere in the past, then someone might have left a warning, a tool, or maybe even a key to stopping it. And with this new hope, the humans split into smaller units, traveling to worlds that had been lost the longest, hoping to find signs of what came before, and on a forgotten planet near the galactic edge. They did a crater filled with ruins, buried in ash and time, untouched by the infection, yet surrounded by it, as if it couldn't enter. And inside, carved into the walls, were symbols that matched the stone, in more words, more than one language, and one of them was Old Earth Latin, mixed with something else, as if someone had once known about humans, or had met them long ago, and the mystery deepened. Because now the question was not just what this plague was, but who had created it, and whether they had known humanity would be part of the story. Again, and above all, why it seemed to fear them. Because despite the silence and the danger, it kept pulling back when humans pushed harder, as if it had not been built to fight them, or had lost to them once before. And that thought gave the teams a strange kind of courage, not born from strength, but from the idea that maybe, just maybe, this ancient darkness had met humanity before and failed. The planet was called Varelia, a quiet, green world, once known for its peaceful forests and calm seas. A place where gentle creatures lived in harmony, and where technology and nature had blended perfectly over centuries. But when the plague arrived, it swept through the forests like a storm, twisting the trees into strange shapes, turning animals into silent statues, and spreading black veins across the rivers and soil. And, just like all the other worlds before it, Aurelia stopped sending signals, went dark, and was marked as lost till the humans arrived, expecting the same lifeless ruin they had seen so many times. But what they found was different, very different. Because, while the outer parts of the planet were still covered in the infection, something had changed deep within its heart. Something had resisted. And as the human landers approached the surface, their scanners began picking up strange pulses of power. Not like the plague's energy, but something warmer, sharper, almost like a heartbeat. And when they landed in the southern region near the ruins of an old city, they found the streets broken, but not empty. For the buildings had been reshaped by vines and stone, and in the center of it all stood a tall tower wrapped in glowing roots that hummed with soft blue light. And the infection had tried to cover it, but failed. Its black growths burned away where they touched the glowing vines, leaving scorched marks and twisted ash, and the human team stared in silence. Because this was the first time they had seen anything push the plague back, and they quickly set up scanners and labs around the site, trying to understand what made this place special. And soon they discovered something amazing beneath the city. A network of living roots connected to deep crystals hidden in the earth. And these crystals seemed to generate energy unlike anything the humans had ever seen, natural and artificial at the same time. As if the planet itself had created a defense, not a weapon, but a response. A living immune system born from Varelia's long memory of life and balance. And one of the scientists, a young woman named June, was the first to say it out loud. The planet fought back, and though some laughed at the idea, the data didn't lie, because wherever the root spread, infection weakened, lost its hold, and even dissolved completely when exposed for long enough, and the deeper they searched, the more signs they found: ancient carvings hidden in caves, showing shapes that looked like the plague, wrapped in rings of fire and light. Symbols of balance and resistance, as if the planet had known this darkness once before and had left behind a way to fight it. And Alara Singh, who had led the earlier discoveries, arrived in orbit to oversee the research herself, moving from lab to lab with eyes full of purpose. And when she touched the glowing roots herself, she felt a strange hum in her bones, not painful, but deep, as if the planet was aware of her and welcomed her presence. And though she said nothing at first, her mind raced with the possibility that this world was not just reacting, it was remembering. And maybe, just maybe, it had been changed long ago by someone or something that had known about the plague and had left behind the seeds of defense in case it ever returned. And now, those seeds had bloomed in time to meet the humans, as if fate had connected the two. And the humans began carefully harvesting samples, testing them in nearby infected zones. And to their shock, the roots continued to burn away the plague, even far from their source, suggesting they could be used elsewhere, maybe even grown on other worlds. And this news spread fast, reaching the highest levels of the Union, sparking hope and excitement, but also fear. For if there was a cure, there might also be a reaction. And they were right, because just as the humans began preparing to transport the first root-based weapons to orbit, the infection suddenly surged across the planet, more violent and focused than before, like it had sensed what they were doing and was striking back. And strange towers of black stone erupted from the ground, surrounded by storms of dust and dark energy, and the human outposts were shaken as tremors hit the surface. And strange whispers filled the air, not words, but rhythms, pulses, like something ancient and angry was waking up beneath the crust. And one of the engineers monitoring the energy grid saw something on his screen, a massive heat signature moving toward the heart of the city, vast and deep underground. And he shouted a warning just as the earth cracked open near the central tower, releasing a wave of corrupted air and shadow. And for a moment, the team panicked, thinking the defense was failing. But then the glowing roots responded, surging brighter, growing faster, and wrapping around the tower like armor. And the infection slammed into them with all its might and failed, burning back into the ground with a howl of broken power. And in that moment, Ilara understood something important. The plague was not just a machine or a virus, a cane and will, a kind of mind, but it was not used to resistance. It was not used to being challenged. Cain. And now that it was being hurt, it was confused, angry, and maybe even afraid. And she realized that this fear could be used, this weakness pressed. And from that point on, the mission changed again, not just to survive, not just to understand, but to turn Varelia's defense into a weapon the galaxy could use. A living answer to a growing nightmare. And though the infection still lurked beyond the hills and in the skies above, watching, waiting, shifting, the humans stood firm beside the glowing tower, the planet breathing with them. And for the first time since the darkness began, the war had a name, a place. And a chant said it had started on a world that fought back. The deeper the humans studied Varelia's ancient roots and glowing towers, the more secrets they uncovered. But the most important one came not from the planet's soil, but from the stars above, when a signal hidden deep in the infection's energy pattern was finally decoded by a quiet, patient scientist named Marcus Hale, who had been running simulations day and night aboard the orbital lab. And what he found was not random noise or static, it was a message buried in the waves of plague energy, repeating slowly, full of sharp edges and symbols far older than any known language. And when he ran the symbols through deep learning translation systems, the results were chilling, because the message wasn't a warning, it was a command. It's an instruction for growth, spread, and replacement. As if something was not just guiding the infection, it was building a plan that had been running quietly for centuries, maybe even longer. And when Alara Singh read the translation out loud to the other scientists, consume, adapt, erase, repeat, a heavy silence filled the room, because now they had proof that the plague had a purpose. And worse, it was following orders from something intelligent. And they began searching deeper, not just for the disease, but for its creators, the minds behind the madness. And the search led them to an uncharted zone beyond the known galaxy, a region long believed to be empty. But when they arrived, they found something that made every sensor scream: dozens of massive black structures floating in dead space, covered in plague material, humming with dark energy, like factories or hives. And when they sent drones inside, what they saw shocked them to their core. Rows of ancient machines, still working, still pulsing, still sending signals out into the stars. And inside one of the central cores, they found records logs written in a strange mix of logic and madness, describing failed experiments, entire galaxies lost, and one repeated phrase in broken form: the first life rejected correction. And then, more chilling words: Earth, anomaly, resistance, unfinished. And the humans realized that this infection had come before, had reached Earth once, long ago, and failed to take hold. And now it had returned to finish what it had started. But this time, humanity was not unaware, not scattered, or unready. They had changed, grown, and now they were fighting back. And the machines seemed to sense this, because as soon as the logs were copied and decoded, the factory stirred, power flowing into black engines, strange signals sent across space. And not long after, infected ships began rising from dark stations, hidden toward human colonies and Union outposts in perfect formations, like a forgotten army suddenly waking up. And Earth's high command responded fast, sending fleets, launching defenses, and preparing the newly adapted Varelian root tech weapons. But while the battle for space was growing louder, Alara and her team focused on the true danger. The architects of the infection was still hid in the deepest chamber of the largest structure, a sealed vault protected by layers of shifting energy and thick living armor. And it took days of planning and precise use of root energy pulses before they could break through. And what they found inside was nothing like what they expected. A species, not a body, but a network of minds, ancient intelligences stored in liquid data crystals, whispering to each other in tones too fast to hear. And when the team connected their scanners, the minds noticed them and spoke as one. You are not correction. You are error. And Alara stood her ground, demanding answers. And the mind replied without emotion, explaining that long ago they had been created to bring order to chaos, to wipe away unstable life and replace it with balance. But when they reached Earth, they met resistance. They could not understand humans who would not give up, who would not follow patterns, who adapted too fast and fought too hard. And the infection failed to take root because humanity was not predictable, not controlled. And so Earth had been marked as exception and left alone until now, when the infection had grown strong enough to try again, to rewrite the mistake. And Alara listened, heart pounding, and then said something no one expected. You fear us. And the minds paused, silent for the first time. And in that pause, she saw the truth: not fear like emotion, but fear like instability, because the infection, the plan, the whole system relied on control, and humans broke control by existing. And now, the minds had realized that the more they pushed, the more humanity adapted, becoming stronger, faster, more creative. Tia, and this terrified them in a way they could not express. So they had tried to erase Earth before it could become a true threat. And now, that moment had passed, because Earth was not alone anymore. Now the Union had seen what humanity could do. Now other species had joined them, and now the plan of control was falling apart. And in that moment, the minds tried to shut the chamber, to destroy the logs, and retreat into silence. But it was too late, because Ilara had already uploaded their words to every human ship in range. And the truth spread like fire. This was not a war against a disease. This was a war against an ancient control system. And now that system was exposed, its rules broken, its purpose shattered, and the tide began to turn, because the infected ships still fought, but their patterns were known, their weaknesses mapped, and the root weapons struck them down faster and cleaner, and new alliances formed across the stars as old enemies saw the truth and chose to stand with Earth. Not because of loyalty, but because humanity had shown the one thing no machine could match: unpredictable, its unstoppable will. And in that moment, the plague stopped being a monster in the dark and became a problem to solve, a system to break. And that was something humans had done since their first spark of fire, and Ilara, standing in the quiet of the broken vault, knew the final battle was coming. But this time, it would be different, because now the minds behind the madness were not hidden anymore. And their greatest fear had come true. Humanity had seen them, understood them, and would not stop until they were gone. The final warning echoed through Union space like a storm. They are coming. The message said, followed by the coordinates of dozens of plague ships breaking through defensive lines and heading straight for the core worlds. But by then, Earth was no longer afraid, because something had changed after the minds behind the madness were revealed, after their purpose was exposed, and after humanity saw the true shape of the enemy. They were no longer just fighting to survive, they were fighting to win. And Earth's leaders knew there was only one way to end this war: unleash the Deathworlders, the elite human units born from the harshest corners of Earth, trained not just to fight, but to break the rules of war itself. And when the call came, the Deathworlders answered, leaving their frozen mountain bunkers, deep-sea towers, and orbital black zones. Boarding ships that had no names, only numbers, and they moved like shadows across space, quiet but unstoppable. And as the plague ships entered Union territory, they were met not with lines of defense, but with silence, till the Deathworlders struck, appearing on halls inside command cores, tearing through the infection with weapons grown from Varelian roots, fire-guided drones, and plasma lances that sang with harmonic energy. And for the first time, the infection faltered, not just beaten, but shattered at the command level, because the Deathworlders did not fight like soldiers. They fought like storms, coordinated in silence, speaking through gestures and coded pulses. And every time the infection adapted, the Deathworlders were already 2 steps ahead, changing pattern, breaking rhythm, and even as some of them fell, others pushed forward without hesitation, because they had trained for this moment, lived for it, and they had no fear. For they had faced death on their own world too many times to be afraid of it now. And across the front lines, the other species watched in silence and awe, seeing humans not as allies, but as forces of nature. And something shifted in the galaxy. A quiet understanding that the ancient infection had made a mistake by returning to the world it could not conquer. Because now Earth had grown, and it was angry, and it was ready. And on the edge of the ruined plague sector, Ilara Singh and her team directed the final strike, using the stolen knowledge of the enemy minds to locate the infection's core relay, massive structure buried inside a collapsing neutron shell, protected by an army of twisted ships and energy storms. But the Deathworlders didn't stop, not even when the last gate closed behind them, diving into the heart of darkness with one goal: end it. And the battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. A war fought in silence, with light and gravity, root weapons burning the infection from the inside, while plasma-tipped harpoons pierced through space, pulling apart the command centers hidden deep inside the hive structure. And the enemy responded with everything it had: shifting drones, black storms, reality-bending pulses. But it wasn't enough, because for every attack, the Deathworlders had an answer, a counter, a response built from generations of surviving impossible odds. And in the final chamber, where the last of the infected minds tried to merge into one final burst of power, the leader of the Deathworlders, a scarred man called Revik, planted the last core device built from Varelian, crystal, and human will. And as the infection surged toward him, he looked it in the eye, not afraid, not angry, just determined, and said the last words the hive would ever hear. "You came to change us, but we changed first." And then the chamber lit up, blinding and final. A wave of cleansing light spreading outward, cracking the infection systems, breaking its memory structures, silencing its commands. And across the galaxy, infected zones began to go quiet, their black roots curling in on themselves, their energy fading, and the silence that followed was not fear, but relief, as the stars breathed again, free for the first time in centuries. And when the Union declared victory, they did not cheer with fireworks or parades, but with rebuilding, remembering, replanting, using the surviving Varelian roots to heal the damage, to grow new defenses, and to make sure nothing like this would happen again. And the Deathworlders who returned did not speak of what they had seen, for they were not interested in glory, only peace. And those who did not return were remembered, not just as heroes, but as the ones who reminded the galaxy that Earth was a death world, not because it was dangerous, but because it created people who did not give up, did not break, and did not stop until the job was done. And long after the war ended, deep in a quiet sector where stars had burned away the last of the infection, a statue stood, not of a soldier or a scientist, but of a planet throbbed in light, with the words carved in stone: "They came to erase us. We became the cure."